Already planning the August reunion at your farmhouse. Figured you wouldn't mind. My sister's message hit the family group chat at 7:15 on a Wednesday morning while I was still in my car in the parking garage, coffee in hand, not yet ready to face the day. I read it twice, then a third time. By the time I looked up, the replies were already stacking up. My mom had sent 3 heart emojis. My dad texted, "Sounds great, I'll bring the fishing poles." My aunt, who I hadn't spoken to in 4 months, was asking about sleeping arrangements. My cousin wanted to know if there was room for her golden retriever. My brother-in-law, who had never once helped with a single repair on that property, was posting a playlist he'd already titled Vermont Vibes. No one asked me. Not one person in that thread typed my name to check if this was okay. I sat in that parking garage for 11 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on my dashboard tick from 7:17 to 7:28. Then I put my coffee in the cup holder, picked up my phone, and typed, "I already have plans for August. Please check with me before making any arrangements." I hit send, put the phone face down, and walked into the office. The replies started before I reached the elevator. "My name is Callie Mercer. I'm 32 years old, and I'm a landscape architect at a mid-size firm in Boston. I design outdoor spaces for hotels and corporate campuses. Work that requires precision, patience, and the ability to hold an entire plan in your head for months before the first shovel touches ground. I'm good at it. I'm good at a lot of things that no one in my family thinks to mention. 2 years ago, I met Luca at a mutual friend's housewarming. He's a structural engineer, quietly funny in the way that sneaks up on you, and the first person I've ever dated who asks follow-up questions when I talk about my work. We moved in together 7 months ago. He knew about my family situation from our third date because I warned him the way you warn someone about a dangerous intersection on a route they're about to take regularly. The farmhouse in Vermont belonged to my grandmother. She left it to me specifically, not to my parents, not split among family, but to me by name in the will she updated 6 months before she passed. Gran had watched me spend every summer there as a kid. She'd seen how I'd drag branches around the yard trying to make it prettier, how I'd memorized every board that creaked and every window that stuck. She knew I'd take care of it. It took me 3 years and just over $40,000 to turn that place into what it is today. I refinished the original wide plank floors myself. I replaced the roof the summer after I inherited it, which nearly cleared out my savings account at 27. I rebuilt the stone wall along the back pasture. I planted an apple orchard on the south side of the property. 12 trees that I drive up to check on twice a year because they take 8 years to produce fruit, and I'm not about to let anything happen to them. The farmhouse is mine, not family property, not a shared asset, mine. But my family has never quite made that distinction. Within the first year, my sister asked if she could bring her friends there for a long weekend. I said yes. She left a window cracked open in November and the pipes froze. She didn't offer to pay for the plumber. My mother called it an honest mistake and suggested I be more understanding. I said nothing. My brother-in-law borrowed the truck I keep stored at the farmhouse the following spring and returned it with a dent in the rear quarter panel and a vague explanation about a parking lot. I paid for the repair myself. When I mentioned it to my sister, she said I was making things uncomfortable. Over the years, I had covered my sister's car registration when she couldn't manage it. I had sent my parents $1,200 when their furnace died in February because they were between things financially. I had bought plane tickets, replaced a laptop my brother-in-law had borrowed and somehow cracked, covered hotel stays for events I wasn't even attending. The running total, if I sat down and actually added it up, which I eventually did, on a legal pad at my kitchen table at 1 a.m, came to just over $19,000 in 4 years. That's not including the farmhouse repairs that happened because of their visits. None of it was ever repaid. None of it was really acknowledged as a loan. It was just the thing I did, because I was the responsible one, the one with the stable job, the savings account, the property, the one who wouldn't make a scene. My sister is 28. She's louder than any room she walks into, and somehow that has always been treated as a personality rather than a volume problem. Growing up, she was the one who cried when she didn't get her way and got it anyway. I was the one who quietly didn't get mine and was praised for being easygoing. I learned early that the quieter I stayed, the less I got blamed for things. So I stayed quiet for a very long time. Luca figured this out about me faster than I'd like to admit. A few months in, after he watched me absorb a particularly cutting comment from my mother on the phone without saying a word back, he asked me gently why I did that. I didn't have a good answer. I told him it was easier. He nodded slowly and said, "Sure, but easier for who?" That question had been sitting somewhere behind my ribs ever since. Back in the parking garage that Wednesday morning, when I typed, "I already have plans," I thought I was being clear. I had never been more wrong in my life. The group chat, within the hour, became a verdict. My sister, "Callie, don't be like this, it's family." My mom, "Honey, it's just a few days, the house can handle it." My aunt, "It would mean so much to everyone to be all together." My brother-in-law, "We all chipped in emotionally when Gran passed. The farmhouse is part of that." That last one made me set my phone down in the middle of a meeting because I felt something shift in my chest, so fast I thought I might actually say something out loud. He had attended my grandmother's funeral for 90 minutes, eaten the sandwiches I had ordered and arranged, and spent the reception talking to my uncle about football. He had chipped in emotionally. "Sure." Luca called during my lunch break. He'd seen me reading the chat that morning. "How bad is it?" he asked. I told him, all of it. He was quiet for a few seconds. Then, "What are you going to do?" I hadn't decided yet, but I felt the edges of something forming. Not anger exactly, more like a structure taking shape. Clear lines, load-bearing walls, the part of my job I was actually best at. "I think," I said slowly, "I'm going to let them walk right into it." That night, after Lucas was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with my legal pad and worked through everything carefully. The farmhouse had a spare key that had been with my sister for 4 years, given in a moment of good faith during a plumbing emergency when I couldn't get there myself. I had never asked for it back. My parents also had a copy, from a visit 2 summers ago. I didn't know what had happened to the key my aunt once borrowed and returned. Probably still floating around in a junk drawer somewhere. I wrote down every key I knew existed. Then I drew a line through all of them. At 11:45, I opened my laptop and searched for a licensed locksmith in the town nearest the farmhouse. Then I looked up smart home security systems, the kind with exterior cameras, motion alerts, and door sensors that push notifications directly to your phone. I spent 40 minutes reading reviews. I wasn't panicking, I was designing. By the time I closed the laptop, I knew exactly what I was doing. I took a Thursday and Friday off work and drove up to Vermont on Wednesday night. The roads were dark and clear. When I came through the last stretch of trees and the farmhouse appeared with its porch light burning, I set it to a timer years ago. Something loosened in me the way it always does up there. Like the volume of the world gets turned down one full notch. The locksmith arrived at 8 the next morning. She was a woman in her late 50s who had clearly been doing this for 3 decades and asked no unnecessary questions. By noon, every exterior door had new deadbolts. She also replaced the lock on the barn where the truck was kept. She handed me 2 sets of new keys, one for me, one for Luca, and took the old hardware away with her. The security company came that afternoon. 2 technicians who walked the property with me like we were mapping a site together. We placed cameras at the front door, the back entrance, the driveway gate, and one angled at the barn. They showed me the app before they left. I stood on the porch and watched a live feed of myself standing on the porch. Then I went back inside and felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph, relief. That evening, I sat on the back steps and watched the apple trees shift from green to gold as the sun dropped behind the ridge. 12 trees. I'd planted them myself one September weekend, hands in the dirt for 2 solid days, Luca handing me the next sapling while I pressed soil around the roots of the last one. My sister had called that same weekend to ask if I could Venmo her $60 for a Pilates class because she was having a month. I had sent it without thinking twice. I sat with that memory for a while, all the $60 transfers and $1,200 emergency payments and the $19,000 total on my legal pad. All the times I had quietly rearranged my own life to make room for theirs. I wrote one sentence in my notebook before I went inside. This is mine, and it stays mine. The next morning, I drove back to Boston. The group chat continued without me. My sister posted a packing list. My cousin asked which weekend worked best around the dog's grooming appointment. My mom sent a recipe link. I muted the thread and let it run. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday morning in early August, I woke up before my alarm and made coffee. Luca sat across from me at the kitchen table. The security app was open on my phone between us, screen brightness turned up. "You sure you don't want to say something first?" he asked, not pushing, just checking. "They've had 3 weeks of me saying something," I said. "I put it in the group chat the morning it happened. They called me selfish and told my mother to ignore my message. They already have my answer." He nodded, then he refilled my mug without being asked. "Okay, then we wait." Just past noon, the first vehicle appeared on the driveway camera. I watched it roll up the gravel, dust rising behind the tires, and recognized the color immediately. My sister's silver hatchback, the one I had paid to register 2 years ago. Her husband was driving. She was in the passenger seat with sunglasses on, arm resting on the open window like she was pulling into a resort. Then my parents' sedan, then my aunt's minivan. 8 people piling out into my driveway, coolers and weekend bags. My cousin's golden retriever jumping down before the van door was fully open. My brother-in-law stretched his arms above his head and looked out at the property with the expression of someone arriving somewhere that belongs to them. My mother pointed toward the orchard and said something I couldn't hear. They were cheerful. They were confident. They looked like people who had no reason in the world to worry. My sister jogged up to the front door, keys already out, and tried the lock. Nothing. She tried again, jiggled the handle, looked at the key like it had personally let her down. My brother-in-law came over, tried his own copy, same result. I watched my mother shade her eyes and scan the porch, then find the camera mounted above the door trim. She went still, then she pointed it out to my father, and slowly the whole group tilted their heads upward and found it. My sister turned around and looked directly into the lens. Even through the pixelated feed, in flat midday light, I could read her face. That expression. I'd seen it before. It was the look she gets when she realizes that whatever has always smoothed itself over for her is not going to smooth itself over this time. The group chat lit up within 30 seconds. My sister, Callie, the key isn't working. My mom, sweetheart, there must be some mistake. My brother-in-law, are you seriously doing this right now? My aunt, we drove 5 hours. I let the thread run for 2 full minutes. Then I typed one message. The locks were changed. You're on private property without my permission. I've notified the county sheriff's office that I am the sole legal owner of this property and that unauthorized entry will be treated as trespassing. Please leave. I hit send. On the camera feed, I watched 8 phones come out of 8 pockets almost in unison. They read the message. I watched the words reach them one face at a time. My sister looked back up at the camera like she was trying to see me through it. My mother pressed her palm flat against her chest. My brother-in-law turned to say something to my father, and from the way his jaw moved, I didn't need audio. Luca, watching over my shoulder, said quietly, "There it is." "There it is," I agreed. They didn't try to force the door. The mention of the sheriff took care of that. What followed instead was 20 minutes of visible argument in my driveway. Gestures, raised voices I couldn't hear, my aunt eventually sitting down on the porch steps like she needed to collect herself. My cousin kept the dog on the leash in the grass while the adults worked through it. My brother-in-law walked to the edge of the property and backed twice, hands on his hips, looking at nothing. Then, one by one, they loaded back into their vehicles, coolers back into the minivan, bags back into trunks. My brother-in-law was the last one in. He looked up at the camera one more time before he got into the passenger seat. Then the 3 cars backed down the driveway, turned onto the road, and disappeared into the tree line. I closed the app. Luca exhaled slowly. "How do you feel?" I thought about it honestly. "Finished," I said. That's exactly the word. Finished. That evening, my mother called. I let it ring once, then answered. I decided beforehand that I would say what I needed to say calmly and only once. Her voice was shaking in the particular way it gets when she's moving between hurt and accusatory and hasn't settled on one yet. "Callie, how could you humiliate us like that? In front of your aunt, in front of—" "You didn't ask," I said. My voice was even. "That's all this is. You made plans on my property without asking. I told you the morning it happened that I had plans. You told my mother to ignore my message, so I let you find out in person. It's a family home." "It is not. Gran left it to me. I have the deed. I've spent 3 years and $40,000 on it. It has never been a family home. I want you to hear that clearly." Silence on her end. "And there's something else," I said. "I've been supporting this family financially for a long time. The furnace, the car registrations, everything I've covered for my sister over the past 4 years. That's done. I've already canceled the transfers." A long pause. "Then you're punishing us." "No," I said. "I'm stopping. There's a real difference between those two things." I heard her draw a breath. I didn't wait for whatever came next. "I love you, but I'm not available for this right now. Good night." I hung up. Then I opened my banking app and did exactly what I'd said. The $600 monthly transfer I'd been sending my sister, always called a loan, never repaid, for 2 solid years canceled. The subscription account, covering my parents' streaming services, removed. My brother-in-law's access to the shared membership I'd been paying since their first anniversary, gone. 7 minutes. Each cancellation felt like setting down something I hadn't realized I was still carrying. The following week was noise. My sister moved through every register in order. Fury, then guilt, then a brief and conditional attempt at apology. My mother sent paragraphs. My aunt left a voice message I listened to once and deleted. I didn't respond to any of it. Not out of cruelty. I simply had nothing left to explain. I had been clear. What they chose to do with that clarity was entirely up to them. 2 weekends later, Luca and I drove up to the farmhouse together. The driveway looked exactly as it always does, gravel settling into the curve of the hill, goldenrod coming up along the fence line, the porch light already on from the timer. Inside, everything was where I'd left it. The wide plank floors, the stone fireplace, the kitchen window that looks out toward the orchard. We spent 4 days there. Mornings with coffee on the back steps, watching the light move through the apple trees. Afternoons in the garden. Evenings with the windows open and whatever we felt like making for dinner. No itinerary. No one else's expectations to manage. No quiet tallying of what I'd given to make someone else comfortable. On the 3rd evening, Luca sat beside me on the porch and asked, the way he does when he's actually curious and not just filling air, "Do you think they'll ever really understand it?" I thought about it before I answered. "Maybe," I said. "Eventually, maybe, but I realized something. It matters less than I used to think it did. I spent years waiting for them to see me differently, to decide my property was mine, my time was mine, my money was mine. I was waiting for their permission to keep what I'd already earned, and that's a long wait for something that was never theirs to give in the first place." He didn't say anything. He's good at that. The orchard was going dark at the edges. The sky above the ridge had turned that particular deep blue that comes just before the stars appear, the color that always feels like the day taking one last breath before it lets go. I've made some adjustments since that August. The farmhouse has a short list of people with access. Luca, my closest friend from college who has never once taken advantage of anything, and my neighbor's son who checks on it through the winter. That's the whole list. The cameras are still running. Not because I'm afraid, but because I learned that summer the difference between an open door and an unguarded one. They are not the same thing, and I had spent years confusing them. My relationship with my family has settled into something quieter and more honest than it's ever been. My mother and I talk once or twice a month. She's learned not to bring up the farmhouse. My sister and I have exchanged maybe a dozen texts since August. Surface level, careful, mostly fine. The financial support is gone, and they have managed. People tend to find a way when they stop assuming someone else will find it for them. I'm not angry. I want to say that clearly because I think people expect a story like this to end with heat. It doesn't. What I feel is something that took me a while to put a name to. It's the absence of a weight I'd stopped noticing I was carrying. The kind that doesn't hurt exactly, just sits there pressing quietly until the day it's gone and you finally remember what it felt like to stand up straight. I know what I own now. I know what I've built. I know what I'm willing to give and what I'm not. Those are not complicated things. They only feel complicated when you've spent years letting someone else define them for you. Last September, the apple trees gave their first real fruit. Not a full harvest. 6 of the 12 trees, modest yield, but enough. I picked them on a Saturday morning with a wooden crate and brought them inside. I made 2 pies and a small jar of applesauce and set the rest in a bowl on the kitchen table. I stood there in my own kitchen, in my own house, and just looked at them. 12 trees, 8 years of waiting, every single one planted in ground that was mine. If you've ever had to take back something that was always yours to begin with, your time, your money, your space, your right to say no to people who assumed the answer would always be yes, you know what that moment feels like. You don't celebrate loudly, you just breathe and notice that the air is different. If any part of this sounds familiar, tell me in the comments. You're not alone in it. And if you want to hear more stories like this one, subscribe. The next one might remind you that the quietest decisions are often the ones that last.